Richard and Evelyn were not in a great place in their relationship. They had been at each other's throats for months. Richard thought it was just a phase of their relationship and things would eventually get better. He could not have been more wrong. Out of the blue, Evelyn completely blindsided Richard with a protection order. This order prohibited him from returning home without prior written permission and required him to coordinate with Evelyn to see their kids. The order was effective for 90 days. Devastated, Richard was fortunate to find a brilliant, no-nonsense lawyer who filed a rebuttal to the protection order. However, she warned Richard that these cases often took time, and it was unlikely they would see a judge before the 90-day period was up. She stressed the importance of adhering strictly to the court order, cautioning that any deviation could severely disadvantage Richard if Evelyn chose to renew it. Within a day of the order, Evelyn needed Richard to take care of the kids. Since he had been staying at a friend's house, Richard had nowhere to take the kids. He and Evelyn agreed that he could watch them at their home. Richard waited a few blocks away for Evelyn's written permission via email. Evelyn angrily called Richard to check why he hadn't arrived yet. He reminded her she needed to send the email to give him explicit permission to come to the property. This situation repeated twice more within the first week. To ensure compliance, Richard insisted on receiving the email before leaving his temporary residence, which was about 20 minutes away, instead of waiting a few blocks away to be granted permission. On one occasion, Richard had planned to pick up the kids to take to school, which was near his workplace. However, Evelyn once again failed to send written permission, so Richard was forced to go to work without picking the kids up. Evelyn, furious at his absence, called him. Richard explained the situation. Evelyn had to take the kids to school herself, and as a result, she was late for work. After that event, Evelyn offered to grant Richard blanket permission for access, but his lawyer advised against it, emphasizing the need to follow the order strictly. A few weeks later, another incident occurred when Evelyn forgot to send permission. Her boyfriend, Kieran, who turned out to be her direct supervisor, was staying over but didn't have his car. They both needed to get to work. Because Evelyn had once again failed to organize for Richard to pick the kids up, she was forced to ask a friend from her work to come and take the kids for her. The friend discovered Evelyn's relationship with her boss, and the scandal got back to the workplace. Within a week, Kieran was fired and Evelyn was suspended. By then, Richard had his own place, and the kids primarily stayed with him. Richard later found out that the protection order had been Kieran's idea, which backfired. Evelyn was quite mad about it because it became evident that Richard wasn't a threat to the family. The judge was quite harsh with Evelyn over it when they settled for support and parenting time, calling it intentional and harmful parental alienation. 10 years went by since Evelyn started a relationship with her boss, Kieran, and kicked Richard out of their house. Kieran and Evelyn had remained together all that time, and Richard had gotten remarried. Richard continued to harbor resentment towards Kieran, though he remained polite and respectful due to Kieran's role as his kid's stepdad. Richard always thought he'd find a petty way to get back at Kieran, and finally, an unexpected opportunity for revenge presented itself. Richard's kids were mostly grown now, with some in university and others in high school. The university-aged kids lived with him, and the younger ones shuttled between Evelyn and him. Richard and his new wife each had their own vehicles, but she primarily used the minivan for family outings, which the kids also used. To prevent losing the only set of keys, Richard attached an AirTag to them. One day, Richard's eldest kid borrowed the van and ended up at Evelyn's. The next morning, when another child needed the van, Richard discovered through the AirTag that it was hours away in an industrial area of another town. Alarmed and confused, he contacted the police after verifying his son was safe at Evelyn's. The police found the van driven by Kieran, who claimed he had permission to use it. As Kieran was not authorized to drive it, Richard requested the van be impounded. Kieran, stranded out of town, was detained by the police. Richard retrieved the van from the impound yard, finding it loaded with industrial fasteners and cables for seismic mitigation, apparently for Kieran's work. Refusing to transport Kieran's work materials, Richard arranged for them to be stored at the yard. Kieran and his boss, desperate for the equipment, contacted Richard repeatedly. Richard demanded payment for all related expenses, including storage, towing, and their transportation costs. Eventually, Kieran's boss paid the costs, totaling nearly $600. Richard had maintained a distant but civil relationship with Evelyn over the years, and she revealed to him how furious she was with Kieran for his actions. Kieran kept his job but missed out on pay increases and bonuses. Throughout this ordeal, the consequences for his actions fell squarely on him, both at home and at work. Richard was satisfied to have finally gotten even a small amount of revenge on the man that tore his life apart a decade ago.